here to stand up for Canada's diplomatic relationships and our economic interests, and I will be pushing those Canadian interests on the international stage. Of course, we will also be highlighting the many advantages of Canada on the world stage, our innovation, our economic fortitude, as well as our advocacy for peace and integrity in the global order. Three main points. First of all, yesterday, the signing of the accord, the agreement with the EU, the Security and Defence Partnership. This is good news for Canadians and Canadian businesses in particular. There are going to be more open supply chains now between Canada and Europe in the area of defence and defence procurement. For example, Canadian companies are going to be able to compete on par with EU companies in the area of defence and security. This is unprecedented, and so this will add value to the Canadian economy and of course to Canadian businesses in this sector. Secondly, NATO. We're here today with our international counterparts to stand up for the rules-based international order, to stand up for multilateralism over unilateralism, for cooperation over protectionism. And thirdly, our supports in the Middle East. As of today, we have helped over 500 Canadians in the region. We've deployed additional consular services throughout the region, and we are going to be seeing over 100 people on a flight that leaves from Jordan this evening. We have been helping international partners as well. Some of the individuals that we've been helping have been registered Canadians with our ROCA system. Others are showing up at the border. They're also receiving help. That's why we have that number of 500, because that's numbers over and above the ROCA numbers. So let me just say in conclusion, there is much activity, dare I say volatility, on the international stage, but Canada is here and we are doing what we do best, standing up for our interests and helping as many people, including Canadians, at all turns. Thank you.
Minister, could you tell us whether or not there's some fidelity as to whether or not Canada accepts the notion of going to 5% of GDP at the end?
So if you look back at Canada's history at this summit and as a founding member of NATO, we have always been consistent with our allies and with supporting what is on the table at NATO. The question really is the timeline. What is the timeline that we would utilize to get to a heightened percentage? We took the bold step of reaching 2% within a year. That is going to be a big lift for Canada. And as many times as I have stood here and spoken to you about the 2%, it gives me great pride to be able to say that we will be reaching the 2%. In terms of the future amounts and numbers that we are looking at as NATO allies, I will say that we are always standing with NATO. We are a founding strong member of NATO, and we will continue to advocate with our NATO partners for what is necessary in terms of global cooperation, including support for Ukraine.
Minister, comment vous voyez ça, Madame Anand, justement, l'atteinte de ce 5%-là? Quel sera le chemin que prendra le Canada et est-ce que les contribuables vont sentir la pression de cet engagement-là vers votre pays?
Well, premièrement, nous avons vu que les contribuables veulent voir que nous allons être à 2% avec nos alliés. Donc, ça, ce n'est pas seulement une question de contribuables, mais ça, c'est une chose la plus importante parce que ce sont l'argent de contribuables. Mais l'autre chose est que fait nos alliés? Quelles sont leurs approches ici? Et j'ai parlé avec mes homologues souvent. Et nous sommes d'accord que c'est important de bouger ensemble, de continuer d'être ensemble sur l'étage international. Donc, nous sommes ici pour cette conversation. On va voir les leaders du monde de l'OTAN, y compris notre Premier ministre, qui vont avoir la conversation. Quel va être le chemin vers une haute chiffre. Mais ça, c'est la question. Et aussi, deuxièmement, c'est l'échéancier. Quel va être l'échéancier? Est-ce qu'il y aura une revue en 2019? Ça, c'est la question maintenant, mais c'est le début de la conférence. Peut-être nous pouvons avoir une autre conversation après ça pour adresser quels sont les chiffres maintenant et quel est le chemin pour le Canada, pour notre pays. Nous savons que nous avons l'Arctique. On va protéger l'Arctique avec les Autochtones. On va protéger la sécurité, la défense de notre pays. Et la chose la plus importante là est la population canadienne. Qu'est-ce qu'ils veulent? Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont besoin?
Can you share what kind of timeline Canada would like to see?
So again, I'll start off by saying we're reaching 2% within the year. That is a target that we have been striving for. I've spoken with many of you about this target, and this is very good news for Canada internally, domestically, because it's going to increase our security and defense at home. It's good news for Canada on the global stage because we've reached that number. Now, in terms of the timeline, which was the heart of your question, on the table will be various approaches to get to a heightened figure. And one of the dates that is being proposed is 2029. And we like to see steps along the way where there can be a re-examination of whether this is the right approach, augmenting at this rate in terms of domestic spend. And of course, there can be so many factors exogenously that affect a decision to increase your defense spending. What are the situations at home domestically? What are the economic indicators? What are the views of our domestic population? What were we able to do within the first 3 or 4 or 5 years? You've seen this defense and security partnership in the United States and the European Union that we are executing on. That's going to increase our base, our defense industrial base here in Canada, and that's going to be also very important to look at when we get to the 2029 figure. So let's take it step by step. Let's have this conversation, which the Prime Minister will lead on behalf of our country, and then let's regroup in light of this arrangement with the EU, in light of increased defense spending to 2%, and in light of Canada's ability to protect and defend our own citizens.
Minister, in 2014, Canada committed to 2%, and then it turned its assignment in a year late. What are allies to believe this time? Mr. Rutte today said that Mr. Trump's commitment to NATO will only stay solid if Canada and the EU live up to this. So I'm not hearing a solid commitment to spend another $50 billion a year on defense from you. What's different this time?
Well, let me say, Steve, that what you are hearing from our country and from our new Prime Minister is a solid commitment to ensuring that we are living up to our obligations multilaterally and our obligations for the defense and security of our own population. That's why Prime Minister Carney made the decision for us to get to 2% this year, because it's in the interest, the best interest of our country. In terms of a heightened percentage, that's the conversation that will be had here over the next 2 days. It is premature for me to answer that question. I would look forward to a conversation going forward. But let's let the leaders of NATO, including Canada, a founding member of NATO, have this conversation. And then let's chart the path forward for Canada, in Canada's interest, for our own defense and security.
Minister,
I'm wondering, Donald Trump is back at the table of NATO. I'm wondering how concerned you are over things he said in the past where he's inconsistent on his support from Trump.
What I am glad to see is that President Trump has engaged with the G7 in a meaningful way. He's engaging with NATO in a meaningful way. And our Prime Minister has engaged personally on a one-to-one basis with the President often. These types of conversations, multilaterally and bilaterally, are of the utmost importance when there are serious issues to be addressed, whether we're discussing the global stage, the Middle East, Ukraine, or whether we're talking about our bilateral relationship, including trade and security and defense. It's a good thing. We need it to continue.
Regardless of the new number, will there be an effort at the summit here in recognition that Canada has work to do to fix its reputation at this stage? Whatever the new number is, Canada has been criticized for being a laggard, and to Steve's point, is handing in the assignment a year late. So is there an effort here to present a new approach that is to try and fix Canada's reputation in a sense?
Actually, I'm not buying the premise of your question at all. When I'm in the conversation, when I'm speaking with Mark Rutte, when I'm speaking with NATO allies, when I'm speaking with my counterparts bilaterally, what I hear is that Canada's leadership on the international stage, especially with Ukraine, especially in Latvia, where we elevated from battle group to brigade, where we have the largest multinational effort on the eastern flank, we are actually a leader. So I think what we should be saying is we're reaching 2% this year. We're a leader on the Eastern Front, including in Latvia, leading the largest multinational brigade. And we are making sure that we are at the table as a founding member of NATO, making sure that we're representing Canada's interests for multilateralism over unilateralism. Never has that been more important than it is right now, and Canada is here ensuring that that work gets done.
Minister, Spain and Slovakia are saying that they don't want to meet the conventional 3.55% targets. They have other priorities domestically. There are other pressures on Canada's budget as well. Is Canada sympathetic with the position of Spain and Slovakia, or is it more on the side of trying to persuade them to meet the Allies' target?
Well, the question rightly points out to economic stress in domestic economies, including Canada's. Housing, affordability, the cost of groceries. Those are the preeminent issues domestically that we as a government need to take on board and will continue to do so. So we are, all countries, including Canada, balancing our obligations on the international stage, including here at NATO on the one hand, and our obligations for the citizens of our countries. And Canadians elected Mark Carney and this government because we committed to ensure that we'll address those issues at home, to build more housing as soon as possible, to ensure we're alleviating the cost of groceries and the cost of living with a middle-class tax cut. Those were promises Mark Carney made on the campaign. And so that's exactly the balance that we are striking and will continue to strike.
Erwin Kotler is warning about the possibility of terrorist supercells in Canada, Iranian terror cells. He's warning that the possibility Iran may have activated these in Canada as a threat to Canada. What efforts is Ottawa taking to protect the Canadian people from the possibility of Iranian terrorism, given Mr. Kotler's remarks?
Well, in addition to Mr. Kotler's remarks, we are very concerned about foreign interference, including the types that were highlighted by him. And we're very concerned about the Iranian regime, generally speaking. That's why we declared it a terrorist entity. That's why we have not had diplomatic relationships with Iran since 2013. We will continue to take any possibility of foreign interference extremely seriously, and that is underscored by the work that we will advocate for here at NATO, as well as the work that we were doing at the G7.
Minister, should